Hey everyone, gather around. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to Lionheart Radio. I'm your host, Rick Alexander. I founded some companies that reside in San Diego, California. Occasionally, I run really long distances for pleasure. And today, I am talking with Esther Avant, who is a nutrition coach and a personal trainer. This episode is packed with actionable advice. The one disclaimer I have is that from time to time, you notice that you'll hear some wind noises. Esther is on a balcony in Hawaii, living that good life that most of us, definitely most of us on the East Coast, are jealous of, especially as we approach the winter months. But I really had a great time. I think Esther has an awesome philosophy on life and on training, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I definitely enjoyed recording it. Without further ado, Esther Avant. Esther, thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
So Esther, you are a personal trainer and you are a nutrition coach, but what I really like about your approach specifically is that you take a lifestyle approach. You look at wellness from the entire lifestyle aspect. So at the risk of diving right in, I'm curious, where do you think that most people get it wrong when it comes to the lifestyle aspect?
That is easy. Nutrition.
Really?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to people that they need to be active, they need to move. Whether or not they're doing it is a different story, but it's I guess kind of innate that people know like moving is good. Mm-hmm. And I think where most people fall short is with the nutrition aspect, that not necessarily that they don't realize it's important, but that they've been kind of fed so much either misinformation or conflicting information that they don't even know like what they should be doing anymore. Is without fail, when I ask a client, how's your diet? They'll say, oh, pretty good. And what people mean by pretty good is like, just across the board. I'm like, okay, maybe that's pretty good as compared to, what you were doing before, I guess, but like not there yet. And then another aspect that I think people overlook has been coming up a lot recently for me is stress management.
Okay.
We're just in like this go, lifestyle, and people don't realize the importance of stopping, of working on restorative practices, and how that can tie into weight loss or not losing weight in the first place. So I think the biggest mistake is when people think that exercise is going to solve everything. Like, yes, it's very good for you and you should be doing it, but if you're only doing that, you're only looking at a piece of the puzzle. Right.
And then from a biological perspective, your movement practice, whatever that is, that's a stressor just like every other stressor.
Yes.
And I want to unpack all that, but I want to start with the nutrition thing before we get into it. Cool. So one of the problems, as I see it, because of this, everything is open source, because right now we have the internet and everybody has access to everything. I think, at least me talking to some of my more unhealthy family members, they feel very like, it's hard to wade through it all. Like, well, this person's telling me keto and this person's telling me paleo and this is whole life. And how does somebody begin to like wade through all of this, all the inputs that we have?
That's a great question. And I feel the same way. And I'm someone with a long-term background in the wellness industry. And even I sometimes, go down those rabbit holes and I'm like, I don't even know anything anymore. Like maybe everything I thought was wrong and I can't make heads or tails of anything anymore. So I can only imagine how much more difficult that is when you don't have that background and maybe you aren't as familiar with, how to look at research with a discerning eye and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think kind of most important, and this is easier said than done for obvious reasons, but the most important thing is to find some trusted sources. And obviously, it's hard to know if you're, if you're trusting the right person. I get that that's an issue, but, myself, for example, I don't have a desire to dive into scientific research, papers in my free time. Mm-hmm. So I turn to people like Alan Aragon and Examine.com, and, people who I trust are, better educated at that than I, to do the heavy lifting for me and kind of break it down in terms that I can understand, that then I can, put out to my clients and my followers, knowing that it's sound advice. So I think, first and foremost, when you're just kind of a regular Joe trying to do a little bit better than you have been, is to find those people that you're like, all right, I feel like they get it. They are, speaking my language. They're putting things out in terms that I can understand. And like kind of my, BS sensors aren't going off when I see their stuff. And also to not discredit the importance of just self-experimentation. It's one thing to, have research on something or to have all this information of like, okay, this worked for, X number of people. It's another to try it on yourself. At the end of the day, all the diets work if you do them consistently and with better than a half-assed effort.
Right.
So, keto works, high carb works, intermittent fasting works, like it all works.
Right.
But it doesn't all work all the time for all people. So at some point you need to stop trying to learn more and you just need to start implementing and just see like, okay, there's always going to be another thing out there that I can learn. But right now for the next 30 days, I am solely doing this one thing and I'm going to see how I look, feel, act, at the end.
Right.
And that will tell me for myself, this either worked or didn't.
Yeah. I think actually a really important thing you said at the very beginning is like, well, sometimes there's so much stuff. I'm like, well, do I even know what's right? And I think one of the important things is if you are, because I can't stand an expert that gets dug in and then whatever it is that they've been preaching to their crowd, they feel like they have to dig their heels in. It's like, that's one of the things I really appreciate about like the science aspect is the ability to take a step back and be like, okay, well, maybe I am wrong here. Like, how could I be wrong? And taking that unbiased approach, I think that's a hallmark sign of somebody that's really interested in the truth and not just pushing an agenda.
Totally agree. And I think that's one of the most frustrating things is that people get like so dogmatic about this is the way for all people. This will work for you. Just believe me.
Right.
And what's even more frustrating is that that's what a lot of people, want is they just want to be told, do this and it will work. And as someone who's like just, never felt that strongly about one certain thing, it's just not, it's not as sexy. It's not as marketable to say like, yeah, like we'll figure out, what will work from you. We'll pull from a bunch of different things. Like people want a roadmap that, A, B, and C, do them and you will get to where you want to be when really, that's just not how it is.
Right. Yeah, I think instead of dogma, the way to approach it is to look at them like you're just trying to acquire tools. And the more tools you acquire, the better you're going to be able to step back, kind of look at the entire matrix and be like, okay, no, I need to plug keto in here when I need to upregulate my body's ability to burn fat or whatever that looks like for you.
Yes. That's, the tools in the toolbox is the perfect analogy for it, that you just want to have as many skills as possible to then, have them to apply when it's appropriate.
Right. And then the other thing you mentioned was self-experimentation. Do you have any parameters? Like, how do you go about self-experimentation personally?
That's a good question. I think, I don't want to say it like falls into my lap, but I guess I just kind of like reach a point that I'm like, starting tomorrow, something has to be different. And it's not necessarily like pre-planned or, anything like that. It's just, there's something that I'm not happy with and I'm ready for it to change. I'm ready for it to change right now. And here's my best guess at how I'm going to do that. And I'm all in until, whatever time frame is up. And then I'll reassess. So, I did that kind of with like my first dive into paleo, my first Whole30, is, just kind of not a ton of like pre-planning.
Yep.
Just like, yep, I'm just going to see. I'm just going to do it right now and it's as good as done and we'll assess on the other end.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I approach it as well. For you guys that are hearing a little bit of background noise or a little bit of wind, Esther is in Hawaii, so you can be very jealous as you listen to that. Just know it's a nice cool breeze while she sits on her deck in Hawaii. So when you look at all of these different things that you have done, paleo, whole life, I think most of us, well, I don't know, maybe I'll just speak for me, but I've also done many of these things. As you step back now, where do you find yourself falling day to day? Is there one that you ascribe to more than others?
I guess where I've ended up is kind of taking bits and pieces of a bunch of the different things that I've tried. I feel better when I eat mostly whole foods, kind of paleo-esque. I'm not nearly as strict with it as I once was.
Mm-hmm.
If I want, nachos, I'm going to go eat nachos. There was a time that I was like, okay, well, let me find a recipe for paleo nachos made with sweet
Right.
potato chips. And, now I just don't care enough.
Right.
And I don't think it makes a big enough impact to care.
Yeah.
But, for my carb sources, I primarily go for potatoes, sweet potatoes, squashes, just because that's what I like. I had periods where I was using intermittent fasting, and I still use that. I'm actually going to be traveling back to the East Coast in a couple weeks, and I was reading about how fasting can help minimize the effects of jet lag. So I'm going to give that a shot.
Mm-hmm.
When I've done kind of more dedicated cut phases, I've used the Renaissance periodization diet templates, which are kind of simplified macro
based, right?
Based, and just kind of through all of those, I guess I've ended up in a place where I'm very aware of macros. I guess
Right.
I can now eyeball: do I have a protein, a veggie, another carb, a fat, and the basics of meal timing. Pre and post workout, I'm prioritizing my carbs. Further away, I'm prioritizing my fat. So I think all the experiments have just led me to that more intuitive place where now I don't need to be tracking all the time. I don't need to be constantly worried about, is there added sugar in this? I just, now my norm is doing those things.
Right. Yeah, I hate the idea of trying to make someone do a food diary and stuff, but all of these things, they do make you aware, and then you can rely on your intuition, because until you're aware of what you're eating, your intuition is total shit. No idea what you're eating.
It's funny you say that. There was just a thread in, so my nutrition certs are through Precision Nutrition, and they just put out an article, something along the lines of, why listening to your body doesn't work or something like that, which was an alarmist title. But the point being,
right, of course,
unless you know what you're even listening for or how to listen, just saying that phrase doesn't help anybody. That you actually need you need the tools.
Right.
And for a long time, I struggled with do I have clients tracked? Do I not have them tracked? And that's kind of what it came down to is, do I think you need to weigh and measure for the rest of your life? Absolutely not. But the awareness and the skills that you build doing it short term are invaluable. And I think without that foundation, how can you be expected to eat intuitively? What does that even mean?
Right,
you need to know, first what even the language is before you can start, listening and being more intuitive.
Yeah, I fast when I travel as well. I think it helps with energy, and then it also helps you just not eat a bunch of bullshit in random towns across the country.
Right. A bunch of expensive airport food that's not very good.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and something you mentioned earlier, which was the paleo thing. I struggled with that as well, because I think paleo, it gets, we're at a point now where it's almost become mainstream. So now there's paleo candy bars and paleo, and I was struggling with that because I did paleo for 6 months, and I'm going way out of my way to make paleo brownies, and
yes.
I'm like, okay, so hunter and gatherers definitely did not eat brownies. We can be sure of that. You know what I mean? And it's just, it gets to a weird spot where I think eventually you got to realize, just eat the Snickers. You're gonna be okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
I did the exact same thing. I had all this trouble trying to track down the, cassava flour. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. all these things. And at the end of the day, sometimes the macros were worse. So I'm I don't know if I don't know what that phrase is, cutting off your nose to spite your face or something like that.
Right.
Is that I'm going to all this trouble, but I don't think that it's actually, doing me really any good.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I want the Snickers, just eat the Snickers.
Yeah. But it's worth mentioning, like you said, it's good to start there because it gives you an example of, it makes you very aware of what it is we're consuming on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. And it's good. Just reading labels in general is good. I still remember when I was doing my first Whole30, and, have you done one?
I haven't done Whole30, actually. It's probably the one thing I've not done.
Okay. So it's, it's very, very strict. No added sugars, no just basically no, anything. So you're looking at labels, really scrutinizing them. And I remember realizing that most salsa and most spaghetti sauce had added sugar.
Yeah, right.
Like, why? You don't need that. You can't taste it. So things like that, I've just kind of become more aware of. And now I'm going to look at the label. And if I have the option between one with sugar and one without, I'll go without because there's no need. But I don't really know where I was.
Well, that's a good thing, the Whole30. But that's a good thing with keto too, because I went keto really hard for a while as an experiment, and actually did feel like it made me a better endurance athlete. I felt like I was losing top end strength, which was something my ego couldn't deal with, so I kind of came off of it. But one of the things that I thought was great about it, and I've mentioned this on the show before, was the fact that it makes you look at your different labels. You start realizing, like, oh, there's 8 grams of sugar in milk. What? Like, right? Because everybody's first reaction is like, well, I don't really eat a lot of sugar. And it's like, no, you definitely do, because you're an American.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. You might not be pouring packets of sugar down your throat, but it's in there. You just don't know.
Right. And you don't have to eat candy. You could eat spaghetti and milk, and you're eating, however, like 16, 20 grams of sugar right there.
Right.
Yeah. So I have this theory where I think a lot of people, well, it's not even really a theory. I think many people don't try to live this unhealthy lifestyle, but they start prioritizing responsibilities above their own health. And what happens is they end up in this place that's really far off from where they really wanted to be, or maybe where humans were meant to be. And I see in your website, like in your blog, that's one of the things you talk about a lot, is like these people, you talk specifically to mothers, but they have this like altruistic intentions, and they end up prioritizing everything but their health. So where do you begin? Well, so maybe it's nutrition. How do you begin to like start making people aware of these decisions and start helping people kind of course correct so they end up in a more healthy area?
I think it starts with reframing that what a lot of people, especially women, but just people in general, have this feeling that putting themselves first, making themselves a priority, is selfish. So I think the first step is addressing that and reframing it to help show that when you take care of yourself, you are better able to do all your other things. You're going to be a better employee or a better boss. You're going to be a better family member. You're going to be a better caretaker. You're going to be a better friend. And when you kind of put that spin on it, it clicks a little bit like, oh, the last thing I want to do is do a disservice to these people that are counting on me. So maybe it does make sense to put myself first a little bit if it's going to benefit them. It can almost flip the script entirely. Like, it would be selfish not to.
Right.
Because because then you're not your best person for, whomever is depending on you.
Yeah.
And then I think it starts with just starting small. Part of, this instant gratification lifestyle that we're in is that we want results now. We want to decide right now that we're going to make a change, and tomorrow we want to be done. We want to be at the destination. And it's especially hard when a lot of social media and even mainstream media is feeding you quick fixes, and here's how so-and-so lost 75 pounds last week, and just these ridiculous things, that's how you end up deciding you're going to do something, trying to do a complete overhaul in a few days, getting wiped, falling short, stopping. And that's when you have like this yo-yo and the starts and stops. And if you start a lot smaller and just look realistically, like, where's my life right now? Where can I make a small improvement? And it might be stress, it might be nutrition, it might be exercise, but it's probably not all three at once.
So you kind of take a snowball approach. You try to like just figure out this quickest, I'm drawing a blank, but what are the things you knock over? Dominoes. Jesus. So you look for the smallest domino that's going to make the biggest effect, essentially. That's a great way to sum it up. The two terms that I use are the big rocks and the low-hanging fruit. And depending on the person, one approach might be more appealing than the other. Big rock being like, okay, what's like kind of the biggest hurdle? What's like the thing that if you address that thing, everything else will kind of fall into place. So I guess that's kind of the domino. And that's really appealing to a lot of people because that's where you're likely to see some pretty quick. Feels like you're making progress.
Exactly. Is you're like, okay, I address this big thing. If I can address this thing, everything else is, small potatoes. Um, there are people though who just aren't ready to address that big thing. You're like, I know what it is, I know what you're talking about, but I can't go there yet. Like for example, drinking. A lot of people know I should cut back on drinking. I'm not ready to do that yet, so let's table that for now.
Uh-huh.
So then sometimes taking the low-hanging fruit approach is better, where it's like, all right, what's the easiest thing? Can you wake up and do a 5-minute walk around your block every morning? Great. And that's just kind of like building those small wins of like, hey, look, you did it. You set the small goal and you did it. Now let's stack something on top of it.
Yeah, I'm interested in choice architecture because I think that a lot of people are kind of, they wake up in the morning and they go through their day and they're making decisions not based on where they want to be, but just based on like that instant gratification, like you mentioned. Like I feel like we prioritize things like Instagram and Facebook, and then we wonder why we're not productive. We prioritize like the quick orgasm, and we wonder why we're not in love, right? And we go through these things, and then we're not fit for service, like you mentioned earlier. We can't help anybody because we're like a victim of our own choices in a sense.
You're reminding me of The Power of Habit. Have you read that book?
No, I think I have it saved in my Kindle, but I have not read it.
Very, very good. And it talks about the disconnect between your emotional side and the emotional side of your brain and the rational side of your brain, and refers to it as the elephant, the rider, and the path. And basically just being that when your elephant and your rider are at odds, your elephant, which is your emotional side, is going to win because it's bigger. So no matter how what your rational side is trying to say, if your emotional side doesn't agree, you're not going to get anywhere. So True. That the two ways to remedy that are to get emotional buy-in from yourself or from your client, and really dig deep into the root cause. Why are you invested in making the changes? Like, what does this mean to you? And then the other approach, I guess that you do, ideally both, is to shape the path to get to where you want to go. So setting yourself up for success, and that's basically choice architectures. There's so much interesting research about if you have a bowl of candy in sight and you walk by it X number of times a day, you're going to eat, however many times more candy.
Right.
Whereas if it's in a bowl that you can't see through, you're going to eat less. If it's out of sight, you're going to eat less. There's just all these things. I mean, hundreds, thousands of decisions a day we're not even realizing we're making, because we're just kind of going with, we're just following the path. So when you want to make these lifestyle changes, you have to reshape your path.
Yeah.
You have to replace your candy bowl with a fruit bowl, and you have to put your gym bag in front of the door so you literally cannot forget it when you walk out of the house, and those sorts of things. But I mean, it's just really fascinating, like the psychology of habit change.
Yeah, like if I want to do something, I try to make it brushing my teeth. So like every day when you brush your teeth, obviously it's not a choice. You're not like, gosh, did I brush my teeth today? Nah, fuck it. Like that's not a thing that happens. So try to make those different choices that seamless in your life. Like there's no other option.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that, I mean, that's a comparison I make all the time. And also that part of why brushing your teeth is so innate is because you've been doing it like literally almost your entire lives. Like that's one of the first responsibilities you have as a little kid, is your parents like give you a tiny toothbrush and you brush like however many teeth you have. Right. So like, of course it's become ingrained because you've been doing it for literally decades. So when you're trying to build a new habit and you're frustrated that like, why isn't it sticking? Why am I forgetting? Why is it not coming as easily? Because you've been doing it for days or weeks as compared to decades. So when you're trying to replace, less healthy habits with new ones, you got to remember what you're up against, because those are deeply ingrained habit patterns, and it's possible to create new ones, but it's hard. So, kind of giving yourself some grace in that respect of like, yeah, of course it's not coming easily yet. Like, why would it?
Right. And then when you talk about some things, like if you're talking about sugar, or maybe you're like trying to work out vice being on your phone or watching TV or whatever that is, you also have to like try to address the fact that like there are physiological addictions that take place there that you're also trying to overcome. And that's a difficult thing in itself.
For sure. Just getting like that little notification that like, oh, something on Facebook happened that like now you want to know. Or same thing, checking your email, that, I'm guilty of all those things that all the like time management gurus say, like, don't wake up and check your email. Don't wake up and check your social media. Like, before I even get out of bed,
Yeah.
I've already done it. And I'm like, oh, remember how I meant to meditate instead? Like, whoops.
Right.
But it's true. It's like, it's not just a lack of self-control. It's like deeper than that.
Do you know who Simon Sinek is? He said
Mm-hmm.
he start with why. He's like, I guess it's like the most watched TED Talk on whatever. Anyway, so I had a chance to talk with him after a talk that he gave, and we were chatting. And when we were chatting, I checked my phone, and he was like, "Why did you just do that?" And I was like, kind of caught off surprise because I didn't even realize I did, and I was like, "Wait, what? Why?" Are you? Like, it was weird because he's like calling me out. I'm like, "Why would I do what?" He's like, "Why did you just check your phone when you're like you have a chance to talk to me?" And and I was just like, "Well, shit, I don't know." And he's like. He's like, I'll tell you why, because they program algorithms in your phone so that, like, that dopamine release. So, like, even the way that when you release a photo on Facebook and people like it, they know, like, they're going to give you a whole bunch of likes up front. That way you continue to watch it, and then they're going to let them trickle in. And the way that your picture is going to show up to other people is based on that dopamine release that you are waiting for.
Man.
Wild, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to...
I mean,
so when you're trying to make...
to do that. Right. But it's fascinating that that it's been researched enough and that that someone can even create that algorithm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's $1 billion, so in that sense, it's like the first thing you mentioned, like you're trying to overcome the emotional part of it as well, because that's an emotion, feeling loved, feeling liked, feeling validated. Those are all emotions. And so I guess what is your advice for that first aspect that you mentioned, which is trying to let the reason kind of overshadow the emotional part?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned it starts with why, because that's an activity that I do with a lot of clients, is basically just asking them, why is this important to you, over and over and over again, which is really annoying. And a lot of people are resistant to it at first because they're like, I just told you, you just asked me, I just told you. And I'm like, no, but why is that thing important? Why is that thing important? But it really does get to the root issue, that, it's not about losing weight for most people. It's about how they feel like their life or their opportunities or their confidence is going to be different as a result. And that's what gets you through the times that you're like, I feel like I'm doing all the right things and it's not working. The times you want to throw in the towel, when you can remind yourself, like, oh, this isn't about going down a dress size. This is about being able to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids and then stand back up again without help. That's a lot more emotional and a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, I will skip the brownie and I will do my workout because I want to do that with my grandkids. And I even tell clients to, when we get to that route, write it down, put it everywhere you might need it. Have it anytime that you feel like there might be a moment of weakness coming on or you're feeling really frustrated. Pull that out and remind yourself, like, this is why the sacrifice is worth it. And this is why I'm willing to delay my gratification, because the payoff at the end is worth it.
Yeah, because you want to be capable of a certain thing, right? It's more than it is just the vanity of saying I'm a fit person. It's being capable of what fit people can do, which, like we talked about pre-show, for you was like hiking this morning and seeing the sunset.
Exactly.
Or sunrise, I guess is what happens in the morning. Perfect. So at the beginning of this chat, we started talking about kind of where people go wrong. And the second thing that you mentioned was stress. Why do you think that we kind of screw that equation up?
I think something that you mentioned right off the bat pretty much nailed a big part of it, is that we don't realize that physical stress through exercise is treated the same way in our body as, kind of mental or emotional stress. That especially when exercise, you feel like it's a stress reliever for you. That you're like, oh, I had a really bad day at work. All I want to do is, go box and get some aggression out. Or when you're dieting and you're like, okay, this weight isn't coming off as fast as I want. I need to hit it harder in the gym. I need to go longer. I need to go faster. I need to go more frequently. And you reach a point of diminishing returns where doing more isn't better. Mm-hmm. And now ideally you're living in, the perfect kind of precipice of stress where you you have enough stress that you're performing well, but not so much that you are performing poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to really know where that point is, until your body kind of gives you a big red flag of like, some kind of like meltdown or, a health issue or something like that, that we just feel like it's showing a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. to say like, oh, I'm under a lot of stress. I need to cut back. I need to say no to something. I need to skip my Orange Theory workout and do yoga instead. I need to, this is the conversation I just had yesterday, is I need to stop trying to diet for a while, and I need to just be, and I need to focus on, restoration and stress management before I try to hit it again. And I feel like it's just gotten kind of a bad rap of, talking about stress or saying that you can't handle what you're up against, like, has been portrayed as like a sign of weakness, and that makes people not want to acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I think just in general, people think that they can continue to add stress in whatever it is, and they'll continue to yield results at that same pace. And it's like, if you look at the underlying basis of any health and fitness program, it's overload, rest, recovery, and then you get the adaptation. It's not, stress plus stress plus stress. You have to have that rest period in there. You have to have that point where your body adapts. And I think if you could extrapolate that out and you look at our entire lives, we would be well served to take that footprint and kind of like apply it to everything that we do in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's such a simple way to put it, is the progress in the gym happens not in the gym. And I think that's a really good way to reframe it, that, you have people that are, all these, these memes and stuff of, no days off, no pain, no gain, like, actually wrong.
Right. Right. So dumb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're miserable. That's what you're saying. Nice.
Right. Right. Like, you're constantly beating yourself into the ground and you've stopped seeing the payout for it. So maybe it's time to reassess.
I had a coach, this was probably a few years ago, but basically I was working out really hard trying to get to CrossFit Regionals. And the first thing he did is he looked at what I was doing, and then he took 2 days away from me. And I was like pissed. I was like, nah, you're doing this wrong. But I instantly, like, body composition got better, like sleep got better, mood, everything. And what happens is I think we operate at a certain level for so long that we're not aware of the actual fatigue that we're under, because it becomes our new normal.
Yes, absolutely. I think, yes, I couldn't agree more. And I've experienced the same, that you're absolutely right, that your norm becomes like what you just think is regular. And it's not until you experience something different that you're like, oh, this is better. Right. And I had the same thing when I lived in Virginia Beach. I worked 2 jobs. I was working sometimes like 16, 18-hour days, and working out religiously. I had to be up, I had to be at the gym at 5 to fit in my workout, and I didn't miss a workout, and, and they felt fine. And then I ended up leaving one of my jobs, like almost immediately dropped a little bit of weight, and, and I hadn't, I wasn't actively trying to, I didn't have a ton to lose. So, a little bit was noticeable. And my workouts like almost immediately improved. And I was like, oh, this is because your body was like kind of in that constant like fight or flight mode. Right. And now it feels safe again, and it's able to just like normalize. Like, this feels much better.
Yeah. Yeah. And body composition aside, like the big thing you touched on, which is performance and like mood and how you actually feel. Because as we mentioned at the beginning, like, your body's going to release cortisol in a response to any stress, and that excess cortisol over a long period of time just begins to wreak havoc on your body, on all of your different systems, because it's trying to deal with it. So you're storing extra fat. You're like, your body's thinking like, well, fuck, we're about to go into something else stressful. Like, what do I need to do in order to prepare myself for this?
Right.
Instead of being optimal and ready to meet the next thing, you're like always in reactive mode.
Right. Exactly. So, which, you're right. Once you get used to that, you don't realize, how detrimental it can be until, you allow yourself to ease up and things go back to normal, and you realize what an improvement it is.
Right. And so what methods do you use in order to reduce stress with people? Is it as simple as a rest day, or are there actual active kind of recovery methods that you use?
It depends. For some people, just taking a day off is a big step in the right direction. That especially, people are saying, I do HIIT 4 days a week, and I lift 5 days a week, and then I do a long run one day, and I'm like, well, that was just 9 days of the week. Like, how are you're doing doubles half the days? Like, how do you have all this time? So sometimes it is like, just, you have to meet people where they are. And a lot of times when people are, over exercising for a long time, like with your coach, taking some days away, that's a tough sell. It's hard to get buy-in on something that seems intuitively like the opposite of what you want to do. So I try to, not rock the boat too much. I'm like, all right, let's just start with one complete day off. And then we can move from there. With other clients who are not necessarily exercising a ton, they still have a couple days off a week or something. Then I'm looking more at, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Can you take 10 or 15 minutes for yourself to do something that's relaxing to you? That doesn't involve a screen. Meditation is one that, if somebody is willing to try, I'm a big advocate of. Even just reading a paper book, taking a bath, like just sitting and like not being bothered by anything, putting all the things that beep and make noise, away. Yoga, things like that, nature walks. That's something that I've tried to get in the habit of doing, is like after dinner, instead of, plopping down on the couch or like getting back to work, I'm like, okay, how about I'll put a podcast on, I'll go walk around the neighborhood. I know I'm going to feel good afterwards, and then I can do whatever I was going to do just 45 minutes later. Right. So, I think any of those things is basically, I just start with like, what do you currently do for relaxation and restorative practices? If you don't do anything, what appeals to you? Let's start there.
What kind of meditation do you do, or do you prescribe or use?
I follow the Headspace app.
Okay, me too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Andy has like the most soothing voice ever. And so I've gotten out of the habit of doing it. For a long time, I did it every morning. And I was like very pleased and like kind of snooty about it, that like, oh, I'm a meditator now. And then I fell out of the habit because it was not that ingrained. But I've started doing it again because the Headspace, like falling asleep track, is like a lullaby. I almost never make it through the entire thing. Like Andy starts talking in his slow, soothing voice, and like, I'm out.
Yeah. Last year, I think it was last year, might have been the year before, I went to a conference called HustleCon in San Francisco, and he was one of the presenters, obviously because they built a huge business, but he's talking and the lights are out, and I'm like, dude, turn the fucking lights on. I'm programmed to go to bed when I hear this guy. Like, I don't know what he's saying. Dude, it's crazy.
That's so funny.
Yeah. But yeah, just taking a minute to decompress and to like just not have so many inputs. Everything that, like you said, every screen, everything that buzzes and beeps and is constantly vying for your attention. What I think we don't realize is how much bandwidth that actually takes up on a subconscious level, and we're not capable of like, even like, how do I think about this? Or, you know what I mean? We're not able to process thoughts correctly because we got to quickly push them aside because I got a notification.
Yeah. That's really interesting you'd say that. Are you familiar with John Goodman?
No.
He started a website called the Personal Trainer Development Center and has since kind of morphed it into a certification for online personal trainers. And that's something that he's been talking about a lot recently, is that he feels like he's reached a point that he knows enough about a lot of different things, and his focus now is on thinking about what he thinks about those things. And I just thought that was so interesting, is that he said like he'll completely disconnect and, just take like a notebook with him and just like sit and think about the things that he knows and how they relate to one another, or how that they could relate to one another. And I think that's such an interesting thing. It's like we're constantly, like you said, vying for more information, and like we're missing some big secret or something.
Right.
But really, like, you probably know enough. You're just not thinking enough.
Right. Yeah. Even about whatever topic you're passionate about. If you're passionate about it, you probably do know enough about it. That's something that interests me a little bit. I actually wrote about it in my book a little bit, but it's like, if you were to go to 9 out of 10 people, they don't know what they think about anything, because they're either dealing with all these things that vie for our attention, or they're just getting opinions that are recycled opinions by somebody else. And so, everything that you have, like whether it's the media or whether it's a podcast,
there's some kind of bias that's just going to get projected in that. And so if you never take a step back to like really think about it, you're just affiliating with different groups. And you're like, well, I believe this because they believe this. And this is what they believe. Like CrossFitters believe that you should eat this way. And Republicans or Democrats believe that you should feel this way. And it's like, so many of us have no fucking clue what we actually think about anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's something that's come up a lot recently, like just with, recent political events and being on social media and everybody's voicing an opinion. And I have one friend, Liz, if you listen to this, that's who I mean, you, who, we actually have like these kind of deep conversations about like, I don't claim to be the most educated about this. And, what I say might, I might not express myself well, but we kind of like talk through, how do we actually feel about this? There's a lot of movements happening that I'm like, I think I agree, like, with the premise of this, but like,
right.
I don't know, a lot of the stuff I'm seeing, I don't necessarily agree with, and it's been really nice to kind of do some self-reflection and some analyzing of like, okay, you know what? I can, just like with, trying different diets, I can pick and choose, and I can agree and disagree with whatever I want. I don't need to have a political party affiliation. I don't need to, I can think for myself. And if I put in the time to really think about like what feels right and what seems to make sense, then I develop my own opinion. And like that feels, it's like very adult, I guess.
right. It's funny because I think, especially as it applies to movement practice, you see it like crazy. Like, I think it's what we don't do that holds us back so much. So CrossFit, or let's say endurance athletes, because that's a community I've been in lately, they don't weight train. Or they don't take creatine, right? And weightlifters, they don't do cardio. They just lift for 9 reps, and that's their cardio because that's a funny meme on Instagram. And it's like, right, but you don't have an aerobic base, so you're not as capable of a lifter as you could be. You could train deeper into your session or whatever it is. So I've been very like, and also I have crazy ADD, so as you can tell, I'm all over the place. But it helps me out in an aspect like this because it's like I can step back and be like, well, I think it would help endurance athletes to take creatine, or right? And just like you mentioned, same with the political party. It's like, well, you're kind of fucked up there, but I actually agree with this. And like,
right.
That's something we totally don't do as
right.
people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's so cool when you do start to see like some movement in that like crossover direction that, maybe powerlifters have no interest in yoga or meditation until someone puts the spin on it that says, your self-talk and your breathing under the bar can make or break your lift. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now you're speaking my language. I may not care about that thing itself, but I care about how it can improve, my passion.
Right. Yeah. And then, that kind of comes down to communication. Like so much of us are just talking at each other, so that waiting for until it's our turn to talk and we're not actually communicating on how we feel. Because like you just said, if you were able to communicate why yoga could help you as a weightlifter, like you just communicated it very effectively. Like, no, it's going to help your position under the bar. That's something that matters, right?
Right. Now you're like, well, okay, it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
And especially if, I know there's, maybe it's this like mentality WOD, I think, that's like focused on, that, if you start implementing, or I know like on the meditation front, there's some like visualization tracks that, say you do an experiment and you implement that for 30 days leading up to a meet or a show or an event or whatever. Then you can assess, okay, I did these things, and do I feel like my performance was impacted one way or another by it? If it was negative, obviously scrap it. If, you feel like you broke even, whatever, you could go with one way or the other. But if you feel like you improved, now you have like pretty conclusive data that for you, this is worth doing.
Right.
And I think you talked about that a little bit in the Tahoe recap, was that, you were kind of thinking like, I don't know, but this is worth trying. That, with the counterfact stuff.
Right.
Of, is it going to make a difference? I don't know, but I've got the time. I might as well give it a shot.
Yeah. I went through, this is off topic, but on topic. I went through an executive education course with a bunch of other people that were transitioning out of the military. And just by nature of what it is that the people that were transitioning out did in the military, somebody came in there and talked to them about meditation, and they were all like, what the fuck? Like, they were super closed off, and it's like, just being open to that idea it could open up so many different doors in your life, and you might resonate with it. And then if you don't, you don't. And then you're like, okay, cool. That's not something that's going to apply to me, or I don't want.
Right. But now I know.
Right. And I think if your goal is to become the most evolved human you can be, you can't be closed off to anything. You have to figure out what it is that works and what doesn't.
Yep, I think that's an uncomfortable thing, because generally the stuff that we're closed off to is going to be the most impactful and the most important for us. And that's something that, I've definitely been working on building that awareness, and I work on that with clients as well, is, if I present something to you, or, you read something and you're feeling very resistant to it, I challenge you to explore it more, because there's probably something there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that is something that's hard. Even in people you don't like, you see something within yourself. That's something it's kind of off topic, but I read about it in a book and I started thinking about it. And yeah, if you feel resistance to something, it's because there's something inside of you that it resonates with you somewhere, right?
Right.
Or you feel like you come up short in that area or something.
Right. Right. And doing that deep digging isn't always comfortable, but that's how you make the biggest and the best breakthroughs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Mentality WOD. I had Dawn on the podcast. We have our episode coming out in 3 weeks. Yeah. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Yeah, that was a great episode. So as far as movement practice, is there a movement practice that you subscribe to yourself?
I definitely consider myself a dabbler.
Okay.
I've never, similar to not being, very dogmatic with diet, I feel the same way about exercise. There's a lot of stuff that interests me. There's a lot of stuff that I've done for a time. I like lifting weights. I don't love lifting intimidatingly heavy weights for me. I've done it sometimes. I've followed some powerlifting programs. I followed some Catalyst Olympic lifting programs. It just doesn't interest me in like that being like my main thing.
Right.
Again, I like the movements. I incorporate those into what I do. After a long time of convincing, when we first moved to Virginia Beach, my husband convinced me to try CrossFit, which he was right. I ended up loving, and now I incorporate that. And I guess I kind of like move with the seasons, that I try not to like really marry myself to one specific thing, that there are times that CrossFit is really appealing and I'll do that for months straight. And then there comes a time that I notice like, you know what, I'm not really looking forward to my workouts as much as I was, but I'm interested in, something else. I went to a boxing gym for a while, loved it. I've done Orange Theory, I've done CrossFit, anything, I've done distance running, I've gotten into hiking. Like there's just so many ways to be active that I just kind of go with the flow, and like whatever feels good, that's what I'm going to do until it stops feeling good, and then I'm going to do something else. But what's consistent is that I'm doing something, and that I have a good enough base of fitness that I don't feel ever held back by not being capable of something. That when, we just did a Spartan race recently, didn't really train for it, and it's very comforting to me to know, like, I didn't have to train for it because I've spent years training for it, I guess is what it comes down to. Right.
Yeah, I think that's what I value in fitness more than anything, is the ability to just go soak up an experience for no other reason than you want to. You didn't have to spend forever training. Not that there's anything bad about that. Like, when I just did that 200, I had to spend forever training. But I really value the idea of being able to go on a hike spontaneously or whatever it is that you're into.
That's exactly it. Like just kind of that movement freedom of since I don't feel so committed to any one thing, I don't want to put in the hours to, train for a specific event. Right. But I want to feel capable of, if somebody says, we're doing this mud run, or we're going to do this hike, or, I'm doing this yoga fundraiser, like, yeah, I'm capable of completing that task.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then that's an experience you get, right?
Right. And it's right. And I never regret it. And I just think it's cool to have, that, I guess it's, general physical preparedness.
Yeah.
Is that you get to experience all these different things without, closing yourself off from other potential things.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So the Lionheart Kicker is the final question, and we try to ask every guest, and it's based on advice. So if you could give blanket advice that we're guaranteed everybody in the world would hear it, they might not all follow it, but they would definitely hear what you told them, what would you tell people?
I would say that the key to achieving anything that you want is to take consistent action toward it, which I can elaborate on if that was.
Yeah, I was about to. I didn't know if you were done. Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit.
I was trying to be concise because generally I'm very wordy. So by that I mean we often have like these really lofty goals, whether they're personal, financial, business, health related, and it can be hard to see how you're going to get there. And what comes most naturally to me is diet and exercise. To me, like, I get that if I want to look a certain way, feel a certain way, I have to be active and eat well every single day. Mm-hmm. Like, that is what will get me there. And I trust that putting in that work will get me to where I want to be. And that's a mentality that I've tried to employ in building my own business. Is there are times that it's like just a grind. Like, I'm putting in all this work and I feel like nothing is happening and nobody's listening. And I'm like, why am I putting in all this time and energy if it's not working? Right. Which is exactly how people feel with diet and exercise. Right. And I just remind myself that you're not going to get there by quitting. The only way to guarantee that you don't reach your goal is to quit, which means that if you want to achieve it, all you have to do is not quit. Just continue putting in the work, waking up every day and doing the things that will get you closer. And you will. Just don't stop trying.
Yeah. So this is very applicable, I think, because we're coming up on the end of the year right now, and it's a natural progression of people to want to set all kinds of goals for 2018. And personally, when I get on this time, I'm like, dude, I got goal fatigue. Like, all I do is set goals. But do you have a process that you go about trying to figure out maybe what your larger goal is, but more importantly, like how you break down those small actionable goals?
Yeah, so basically reverse engineering is, okay, you know where you are, you know where you want to be, what you don't know is the middle. So you look at the difference between, the goal and the starting point, and you just figure out, okay, is this, if you're setting a SMART goal that's time sensitive, okay, how long do I have to get from A to B? What things need to change, and how can I break it down incrementally? So, with weight loss as an example, say, you want to lose 50 pounds, then you break down, okay, what kind of time frame is that kind of weight loss realistic? Mm-hmm. And then not just over the course of a month, over the course of a week, what kind of weight loss? If all things are going, textbook, right, what can I expect to see? And then I think the most important piece that a lot of us skip over is switching from the outcome-based goals to the actual behavior-based goals. It's all well and good that you want to lose, 50 pounds, which means 10 pounds a month, which means 2.5 pounds a week. But you can't just make that happen. You can't just decide, I'm supposed to lose 2.5 pounds this week. Let me step on the scale. Oh, it didn't happen. Weird. It comes down to actions. That's what you can control. You can't control what the scale does. You can't control how many people see your content. You can't control, how many, love prospects you find. You can control yourself. You can control how much you're putting yourself out there. You can control your diet, your nutrition. And that's really where your focus needs to be. Is goals are great, but goals don't just happen. So your focus needs to be on what you can do to make that happen.
Yeah. So by behavior, you mean exactly what, like the daily, I'm going to go to the gym this many times, or whatever that looks like for you.
Exactly. Is getting very specific, because I think a lot of times we just kind of have these like kind of fuzzy, like, oh yeah, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm trying to, be more active and like watch my eating. And like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does be more active compared to like when you sit on the couch all the time? Now you're like standing, like you need to define very clearly to yourself, partly to just get out of your own way, because that's a lot of our problem, is that we can't get out of our own way. So if you give yourself an out, you'll take it. Mm-hmm. So the more specific you can be, I'm going to work out 3 times this week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. for 30 minutes. Then there's no ambiguity. There's no, loopholes. Right. It's just, this is what I said I'm going to do, and now I'm going to do it.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. Well, thanks for being on. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think people got a lot of actually actionable advice out of this one, so this was fun.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier.
For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track and delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshit. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest. Cleveland.